Welcome back, guys. We hope you enjoyed your week. Today, Jolene and I are going to be discussing some real life monsters. Do you know who Dennis Rader is? Have you ever heard of the BTK Killer?
It sounds familiar, but I've never heard what it was about, like what they did.
So, Dennis Rader to me is probably more scarier than other serial killers just because he looks like your high school principal, your pastor. He's a very unassuming guy. You would never think that he'd be capable of doing it or doing anything like what he did do. From 1974 to 1976, he killed a variety of people. His first victims was an entire family that he bound, tortured, assaulted, and killed. His next victims were, oh, that scared the shit out of me.
What? What'd you
The
do?
video just started playing.
Oh.
He operated in Kansas around, he was from Wichita. And something else I found kind of interesting about him as far as his upbringing, I mean, there's a few that their upbringing, like Charles Manson, he had a horrific upbringing. His mom, sold him for like packs of cigarettes and beer and stuff like that. But there are some like Ted Bundy and that grew up in like normal homes that weren't abused or anything like that. And he's one of those types of people where he had a pretty normal childhood. He grew up in Kansas. His parents stayed married, they weren't divorced. He had brothers and sisters, but he was always odd. Like, what people didn't know about him is he was hanging animals up in trees, tying up animals, tying up dolls. He would get sexually aroused by watching the chickens get slaughtered. Somebody had to see that. Like, a lot of the things that they talk about that went on in his childhood, like being aroused when he got spanked.
Yeah, somebody, you would think somebody would notice that.
I mean, normally you would lay your child over your lap to spank them. You're gonna notice that. But he would read. He would get aroused by reading books about murders, and that never stopped. That's the fuel, I guess, that started whatever was going on in his head that eventually escalated to people. But there wasn't anything like any abuse to him or anything like that. There's a psychologist that says that the abuse he inflicted on his victims were signs that he was exposed himself to horrific abuse. But his brothers and sisters all say the same thing, that they were raised in a normal home with no abuse, they had stable parents. But they think there was something that happened to make him like that. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think that there could have just been an imbalance there, that he wasn't right, and those things triggered and escalated until he started with people. But at the end of his reign of terror, I guess, he had 10 victims. He killed both men and women, adults and children. There was one instance where he locked the children in the bathroom and killed the mother in the next room. Just reading the narrative of it, it kind of seemed like he was made it a game. Like, can I kill her before they escape the bathroom? And the children, those children, he left alone. He didn't kill those kids. But the first murder, he killed the whole family, parents and two of their 5 children. He was pretty intelligent about it. he worked jobs that allowed him to pretty much stalk his victims. He worked for companies like ADT. So he was installing alarm systems for people who were scared of the BTK killer.
Wow, that's really scary.
He at around the time of his arrest, he was working as like a city inspector and a dog catcher. And that would be perfect too.
Right? Because they're always out and about and.
And they're supposed to be watching people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't think anything about them. And that's how he'd pick his victims. And since he was worked for an alarm company, he would know how to get around their alarm or how to disable it.
That is so scary that they would come in and, oh my gosh.
How they caught him was he was one of the types that I don't know what the term for, I don't know if he would be a psychopath or a sociopath, but whichever one likes to crave attention for it. He would write letters to the police. He gave himself the name the BTK Killer, which bind, torture, kill.
Oh, I was wondering what that stood for.
He would send them Barbie dolls tied up. He would, most, his victims were tied in kind of like bondage type positions, and they had his DNA, but they didn't, have a match to the DNA in the system. So how they caught him is he was corresponding with the police, and he asked them, if I send you a floppy disk, would you be able to trace it? Well, cops ain't gonna tell him the fucking truth. They're like, no, we won't ever know. He sent a floppy disk. Now, you remember, this shows
Yeah.
Ari. You remember what a floppy disk is.
Yeah.
Not like the ones that actually flopped, but the plastic ones.
Mm-hmm.
That really shows our age that we know the ones that actually flopped. But he sent them a floppy disk, and with victims, there was a victim's driver's license, a picture of that, like other, pretty much like taunting the police, like, look, motherfuckers, this is what I did. But what he didn't know is that in the, files that nobody knows are there, how to get to, there was the church, the name of the church that he went to, and also the initial D and the name Raider. So they knew what church he went to, they knew his name started with a D, and they knew his last name was Raider. But they needed something to connect him other than this, because there wasn't really anything other than a few pictures that said he was the BTK killer. And they used his daughter's DNA. Now, this really disturbed me. Just as a woman, this disturbed me. The police used his daughter's DNA from a pap smear she received in college to do a familial link with him to match a DNA left on a victim. Is that not fucking like it's great they caught a serial killer, but what about his daughter?
Right.
That's severely violating her privacy.
That's fucked up. I don't even know what to say to that. That's just fucked up.
What he did, and, there's plenty of documentaries, movies, all of that about the BTK killer. You can actually watch his confession on YouTube. I've watched it many times. It is very disturbing. He has no remorse when he's talking about what he did to these people. It's kind of like he's talking about going to work, what he did that day at work. But that was not only is what he did disturbing, but also how they caught him is disturbing. Because think about, those 23andMe swab your mouth. They do catch killers by those.
Yeah.
It is into a database. You are allowing your DNA to be preserved and possibly used. I don't think it's a bad thing law enforcement does that. But
yeah. I didn't know that they did stuff like that. Good to know, I guess.
When I say that he's like the most unassuming person ever, to think that he was tying up women and, well, tying up people and torturing them and killing them, doing all kinds of vile things to them. He really does look like he could be your pastor or your teacher or your high school principal, or, yeah, very unassuming guy, right down to like the perfect family life, the two kids, the wife, lived in a very, you know, cute little suburban house, and the his wife had no clue, no idea that her husband was the killer that everybody was scared of.
He looks like that dude from Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
Oh, what's his name? Walter? Is it Walter?
like Walter White. You would never think that that
Yeah.
dude was a serial killer.
Yeah, he doesn't
And,
look like it at all.
and it probably, if he didn't get cocky and like start writing the police and sending them evidence and shit like that, he probably wouldn't have been caught, because he really didn't leave witnesses. He was a Boy Scout leader, very active and like,
Is that a person or is that a prop?
what?
This picture. I don't know if it's a person or a prop. It's somebody hanging from a tree.
Probably him. They found pictures. He had this little shed outside of his house, like the girl, you know, like a little part of the garage that was like his area. And they found pictures of him tying himself up like that, and a lot of his victims were tied up like that. The binding was a big deal for him. And most serial killers have a type. You know, like Ted Bundy liked brunette. David Berkowitz, it was a couples, brunette woman and a man, usually in a car. There's specifics that others go after. He was completely indiscriminate. He killed women, children, men, old, young, didn't matter. If he had the idea that he wanted to see you like that.
Yeah, I can't get over the way he looks. That really is.
When I first started learning about what he did, and he confessed to it. I mean, there was no long trial. He just stood there and told the judge in detail what he did. He confessed to all 10 murders. He was given 10 consecutive life sentences. You know, was married to somebody, so unfortunately he ruined her life too, as well as, I mean, I hope his children changed their last name. I know his daughter lives in Michigan. Watched an interview with her, and it hurt her. I mean, imagine that, where your dad, who is the Boy Scout troop leader and, you know, like active in the church, and you
Yeah,
have
that would be a
this
major shock.
picture perfect, you know, American childhood, and find out that the lady that, or the elderly lady that lived up the street that they found bound and killed, that was your dad that did that,
I
and
can't
10
even
other people.
imagine.
That there is also, like I said, interviews with her you can find. They're not easy to watch. I mean, you definitely get the full array of what, when something like this happens, that it's not just the victims and the victims' families, but the person who did it, their families are
Yeah.
affected too. There's a huge web, and I mean, I already know that because I've had multiple people in my family murdered, more than once, or more than one, unfortunately. It didn't just affect us. There's one in my family that we knew, the the person who murdered her. We knew the family, so we seen firsthand how that not only affected us. Of course, it hurt us, but it hurt them too. And you would think that that would be a thought. I mean, it's one thing not to care about your victims and to see a person as less than human and to be able to do these bad things to them. But you would think that there would be the thought in the back of your head what if my kids found out about this shit?
Right.
What if my wife walked in while I'm tying up this Barbie doll all weird? And then later she connects it that that Barbie doll was tied up exactly like they found the lady down the street. Maybe that's what makes them that way. They don't think about that stuff. But yeah, Dennis Rader I thought was a real life monster. Definitely made me not trust people even more than I already didn't after reading this because of how he looks. And, he had a job of authority. I mean, he was just a dog catcher, but it was still an authority figure. And in his spare time, he is tying up and torturing his neighbor. So I think I met a serial killer one time. I was working security at a lumber yard. And the job I had was you scanned a ticket when the person came in, and then you would look at their ticket and make sure that everything that they had in their vehicle was what was on there and there was nothing extra. And of course, if they didn't have enough, you're supposed to tell them. Well, this guy, most people, when, they hand me their ticket, you're some sort of customer service. So you're, hey, how you doing today? Do you need help finding anything? So you can point them in the right direction. This guy, I opened the door. Hey, how you doing today? You need help finding anything? And he didn't say a motherfucking word. He just dead stared at me. And he went in. I opened the gate. He went in. And at first I thought, well, maybe maybe he's deaf and, can't talk. And I'm like, well, deaf people don't really drive. I'm like, well, maybe he just can't talk. Maybe there's something different about him and he can't talk. It's time he's pulling up to be checked out, and he's got a van. And he opened up the back of the van, and I don't remember exactly what he bought. All I knew is it was things like a tarp, a rope, and some shit that don't necessarily go together in a project, but would be perfect if you had somebody tied up in your basement. And still, he's just staring at me. I'm like, okay, did you find everything okay? I'm doing the normal checking out stuff. And he's just still staring at me, not talking. I was like, okay, well, it looks like you're all set. And, I took 2 steps back before he shut that door. There's no way you were pushing my ass in there. And, I go walk back to the little guard shack. I'm like, have a nice night. And at that time, he just turned very slowly, very Michael Myers-ish, and was like, bye. Don't come back. Just don't come back.
Yeah, that would be, that would startle me. I'd be like, okay, I gotta go home sick now, because...
I'm pretty sure that day I met a serial killer. I'm pretty sure. He came back like a couple more times and didn't anything he bought ever make sense for a project. If you're building a patio, you're gonna have the stones, you're gonna have, the little fill-in sand. It was never stuff like that went together. It'd be like acetone and a tarp and something like a door. Like, what are you doing?
Or we just watched too much true crime.
It's possible, but there was also the way he didn't look at me; he was looking through me.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it was very. And like I said, I seen him a couple more times, and he didn't buy anything that made any sense those 2 times. But he talked to me more, and it didn't make me feel better that he talked to me, because I'm sitting there like, "Great, Amber." Way to go!
Don't
get on this
start
dude's
a
right now.
conversation with them.
But when you work in jobs like that, it's your job to be friendly to people, because otherwise it's not good customer service. Now I'm glad I'm not. I don't work anything where I'm face to face with people anymore. I just talk to them on the phone, because that, and especially in that setting, I mean, you really could hit somebody in the head, throw them in the back, and run through this little...
Yeah, because most people wouldn't be thinking anything of it,
I mean, you're on camera, but by the time some people notice that you did it, you'd be long gone. 'Cause especially where that particular lumberyard was. The highway was right next to, so it would have been literally like make a turn and you're on the highway in an interstate.
And
On
gone.
the, it'd just be gone.
That's
But yeah,
scary.
I'm hoping that I'm completely jumping the gun and I really did not meet a serial killer, but I think I did. I'm pretty sure.
You never know.
I don't want to know. Like, I think if that guy ever started, like, telling me stuff, I'd have been like, la, 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 no, 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 don't need to know.
I gotta go. It's
It's
about
my
that
break
time. Yeah.
time.
It's about that time for me to get the fuck out.
I thought it was strange, though, that my little spidey senses was up so much about that guy that if, or when he did start, like, trying to be friendly and saying, like, when he pulled up to the gate, he'd be like, hi. And it wasn't, like, normal, like, you would, I guess I shouldn't say normal, because what the fuck is normal, but
Yeah.
there was no feeling, no, I think the correct term is affect, where, like, you and I say when we start talking or start recording, hi, there wasn't
Yeah.
no influx, no, where you could tell that I was really, that you're even faking happy to see somebody, but you still have that little bit of emotion in it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing he ever said had that in it. Like, it was all flat and just
Well,
eerie.
our spidey senses are never wrong usually, so
Just glad that I wasn't his type.
yeah.
So, did you find some real life monsters?
I did. Have you ever heard of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka?
Not by those names, no.
Or they're also known as the Ken and Barbie Killers.
Those names I have heard. Watched a couple documentaries on them.
Paul Bernardo was born August 27th, 1964, in Ontario, Canada. And it is said that he grew up in a well-off, like, middle-class family. Like, they weren't rich, but they were doing just fine. Paul was said to be a happy young boy who was always smiling. So his childhood seemed to be okay, like a good, normal childhood also. When Paul was 16, his mother revealed that he was the result of an extramarital. And I guess after he found out that information was when his behavior began to change. So he started referring to his mother as a slob and a whore. When he went off to the university, he began picking up women at bars and humiliating and beating them. Paul was good looking and charming, which he used to his advantage. In May of 1987, in the suburb of Scarborough in Ontario, they were hit with a series of horrific crimes. In the beginning of May, a number of women would be brutally SA'd. And the women were between the ages of 15 and 21. And they said the attacks included beatings, verbal abuse, and scaring the victims from going to the police. I'm not sure exactly what he did to keep them from going, but
Probably do something like take their driver's license and be like, I know where you live.
maybe.
The police come talking to me. I'm gonna come talk to you. It wouldn't be that hard to intimidate somebody that you just beat the shit out of not to go to the police.
True. I mean, that is true, considering what he does to them. So after that, they came up with the name of the Scarborough rapist, is what everybody started calling him. And that lasted about 5 years. Paul essayed or attempted to essay at least 19 women. And these women were all grabbed around bus stops, except for there was one girl who it says was attacked in her bedroom. And it wasn't until May of 1990 that one of Paul's victims was able to give them a description. In 1987, Paul had met Carla Homolka. Carla was born in Ontario in 1970, and she was the eldest of 3 siblings. And Carla was described as a pretty, well-adjusted, and popular young girl. And she also had a love for animals. And she started working at a vet clinic after high school. Paul and Carla had an instant attraction, which got worse when he realized that Carla shared the same sick fantasies as he did.
So this bitch liked raping chicks too?
Apparently so.
I mean, how does that come up on a date?
I do not even know how the hell that kind of shit would come up.
You've been married longer than I have, but we've both been married a pretty good chunk of time. And never once, I don't know. I don't know how you would even begin to bring that up to find out the other person
I
scared
don't
of that.
know. That would be something that you'd think that they were like joking. Because she was aware that he was essaying girls and she approved it. And in a few years into their relationship, Paul seemed to be bored with Carla. He was upset that Carla wasn't a virgin when they met, and he ended up turning his attention to Carla's sister, Tammy. Now, you would think that you would be upset over this if you were Carla, but no, she was not upset. She encouraged it.
And didn't she set it up for him to assault her sister?
Yep. For a Christmas present, she told Paul that she could have her sister's virginity. As a fucking Christmas present. Like, what the fuck? On December 23rd, 1990, at the Homolka home, or their Christmas party at their home, Carla spiked Tammy's drink with animal anesthetics that she had gotten from the vet clinic that she worked at. Carla held a halothane-soaked rag over Tammy's mouth, and then they took turns essaying her while videotaping the entire thing.
What a
Her
great
own sister, like, what the hell? Tammy began choking on her vomit, so Paul and Carla started hiding all their evidence that they had around, and then they called for an ambulance. But Tammy sadly never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And there was a chemical burn around her mouth that was noted, but the drugs in her system were not detected, and her death was ruled an accident from choking on vomit from alcohol poisoning. You would think that after that might, calm Paul and Carla down a little bit. No, it didn't. In 1991, Carla lured another teen girl to their home, and the couple abused her and filmed it. But this time the girl woke up and she didn't have any memory of what had happened. And all this shit happened before they even got married, because on June 29th, 1991, Paul and Carla got married.
Yeah, that's gonna end well.
Yeah. And on the day that they got married, a couple found concrete blocks containing human body parts. The remains belonged to 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, who had disappeared on June 15th. She was kidnapped by Paul and Carla and was abused over several days. Almost a year later, on April 16th, 1992, they struck again. This time, their victim was 15-year-old Kristen French. After the release of a composite sketch that looked like Paul, tips started coming in. And I guess, see, this is why, it's good that technology has come a long way, because this, again, was shit that happened before they could get
DNA.
Yeah, they got the sketch and they started getting tips. People were calling in, I guess, just saying how Paul was violent or something like that. But in January 1993, Carla left Paul because he ended up beating her with a flashlight. And within a couple months, a DNA sample had been taken from Paul. That had been taken from Paul. Turned up a match for the Scarborough rapist. And Paul was arrested in February of 1993. And Carla got a lawyer and sought a plea bargain in exchange for testifying against Paul. And she claimed that Paul admitted to essaying at least 30 women. They agreed.
Please tell me they didn't grant too much of a plea, because there's videotapes of this bitch fucking participating.
Yeah. We'll get to that here in just a second. They agreed for a 12-year sentence for her cooperation. But this backfired when the videotapes that they made were discovered. And it was discovered that Carla was not a victim at all, and that she was just as sadistic as Paul. But Carla was released in 2005 and since remarried and had a child.
Oh, that's just fucking terrifying right there.
Yeah.
I hope there's somebody monitoring that shit.
But Paul was found guilty of all charges and was sentenced to life for the essay and murder and kidnapping charges. He applied for parole in 2018, but it was denied. But yeah, they are real life monsters because, for one, that's just fucking horrible. And the way they just look like an innocent, nice, young couple.
If I remember right, they really do look like Ken and Barbie. She is blonde and really pretty.
Here, I'm gonna send you a picture.
He's kind of a handsome guy, like clean cut.
That's a very fitting. I apologize if anybody can hear my dog in the background. He is snoring really loud. Yeah, they look. You would not think that by looking at either one of them.
Amuses me when you and I pick a topic that we're gonna do is we don't really know much about what each other's going to do, like if there is any similarities in them. And this week we kind of unintentionally had this theme of kind of unassuming killers. But yeah, they look like the typical 90s couple.
Yeah. You would never look at them and think, and she sounds really sweet. I've listened to like a lot of interviews of them like talking to her, and I mean she's different, like the way she speaks and the way she's talking to people in the interview. She kind of makes my skin crawl, but she's still got like a little sweet little voice, I guess. I don't know. You wouldn't think that she would be a cold-blooded.
Both of the serial killers that we picked, you picked a team, which that always fascinates me, how the team dynamic works. And
you don't hear of of two people doing it very often, especially couples. I mean, I know that there's more. I'm sure there is, but you don't hear of them that often.
Most of the time it is they're like, oh, well, he was a real sweet guy. That kind of was the same with Dennis Rader. Oh, you would never think that he did that. He's a really nice guy. He came over and mowed like my lawn yesterday or whatever. Meanwhile,
that's how it always goes. They're always who you don't think it is.
Well, that's how they're able to operate for as long as they are and not get caught, is because they do blend in. The ones that don't get caught aren't the person that's on the fringe of society, that's noticeably on the fringe normally. People that blend right in because they have to be able to do it. They have to be able to blend in and be somebody that nobody really notices.
I don't know. She's kind of got an evil look in her eyes, but he does not. And he's actually more evil than her. I mean, he started the shit before she was even in the picture.
And what's scary about him is he's kind of like universally attractive. Like, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what kind of guy that you're kind of into, you would talk to him.
Yeah, he's definitely got the typical sandy blonde hair, blue eyed.
You'd give him the time of day. She kind of looks a little drunk in that picture.
Yeah, she does. Oh, here's one. She just looks mean. There's two people. I don't know. Oh, that's him. He looks different in that picture. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. Who's the other person?
Yeah, she just kind of looks like she's a bitch in that picture. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people's talking mad shit right now. And it's true. I mean, you shouldn't be mad at it because you did it, but you're gonna be.
Yeah, he still looks sweet and innocent.
Because he doesn't think that he did anything wrong. See, she's mad she got caught. He doesn't think that he did anything wrong to begin with. There's no remorse on his face whatsoever. She's just mad she got caught.
Yeah, but I mean, she basically got away with it though, because she still got out a long ass time ago.
Yeah, that kind of is what's scary to me about this story. He's locked away. He ain't never gonna hurt nobody
Yeah,
again.
but
But
she's
she might.
still running around, and she was part of that.
Well, like all the stuff with Raider when he was a kid. You're trying to tell me that nobody noticed that. Nobody noticed this little kid tying up rabbits in trees.
Right.
Nobody noticed this, when you spanked him that there was a reaction there. Nobody thought anything of that maybe this child needs some help. I don't even think that getting any psychological treatment would have helped him. I think no matter what he
Yeah,
was,
probably not. Well,
his
these two, they didn't have any, like, they grew up perfectly fine in a normal, well,
like
what's
an
normal,
idyllic
but yeah,
situation. And what his brothers and sisters said, they did too. But he was doing these things, and I guess if you grew up on a farm, and I mean, when I was a kid and lived on a farm, I didn't have a lot of supervision. Like, I was allowed to just go wander off. So yeah, it's possible he could have been doing like the animal torture stuff and not get caught. But the reaction to being spanked, somebody
right,
noticed that. A lot of the things I found are him self admitting, and you do have to also keep in mind with somebody like Dennis Rader that he wanted to get caught. If he didn't want to get caught, he wouldn't have been sending police evidence. He was sending them
true,
Barbie dolls tied up, the victim that they just found, and their pictures of their IDs and stuff like that. He was tempting, or trying to play cat and mouse with the police, but he wanted to get caught. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mentioned to himself. So there's a lot of the things you find that are self-admitted. I think you need to take with a grain of salt because he seems to want notoriety. He
right.
wants to be known as BTK. He named himself.
Something he could be making up.
So yeah, exactly. He could be making the story worse than it really is to make his story better. There wasn't anything like where people found anything or caught him or anything like that. It's just even the murders, he stood up there and told exactly what he did. He didn't even try to play around with it wasn't me. It was more like, oh, you got me, guys. Was actually mad at the police for lying to him. That's what he was upset about. You lied to me. The floppy disk.
Oh,
Not
excuse
that
me.
not that he just ruined the lives of 10 people, but over the course of time, ruined the lives of 10 people and his family. Didn't care enough about that. Would you ever want to interview a serial killer?
Yes and no. I don't think me personally, I don't think I could handle it because I have anxiety and that would be too much for me, I think. But it would be interesting to sit down and talk to a
I would
serial
have
killer.
such weird questions. I mean, I'm pretty sure that, people like Dennis Rader or Kemper, that there's probably strict protocol to even being thought about putting on their visitors list to go talk to them. But I would ask questions probably not what they would want to talk about. Because I'm interested in how do we treat them? I mean, are other prisoners scared of them? Or are they just, another neighbor where your crime is no worse than mine or no better? Um, you would think that even other inmates may be a little hesitant because these are people that hunt people.
Right.
I mean, I guess there's probably more than one in any given prison, but like legit, this raider, he hunted people right down to his day job directly related to hunting people. That would make the guards on edge. That would make other inmates on edge. You would think.
Yeah, it would sure make me on edge. That's for damn sure.
I would most definitely sit down and interview a serial
Oh,
killer.
I know you would. You'd be like, "Yep, let's go."
I got questions already written up. But it would be things like that, like how are you treated by other inmates? How does the guard staff treat you?
They'd be like, "What? I don't want to talk
I
about
mean,
that."
don't you want to talk about my victims? No, 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 no. I already know all about
I watch the
that.
documentaries. I'm good there.
I'm good on that. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. Are they feeding you all right? Are they treating you okay in here? I mean, do you have to go see lots of like shrinks and shit like that? What are they doing for you in here? To me, serial killers, especially the ones that have not necessarily like the shark mentality, but the ones that have a ritual, they fascinate me the most because I can kind of understand the shark mentality type serial killer that, you know, kill pretty much whoever comes in their path with no ritual or no gratification other than, just a power trip, as being something left over like primally, like something that we needed when we were just barely out of being monkeys to survive, that's left over. I kind of get that. But when there's a ritual involved, how does that happen? That's what fascinates me, is what is it about that ritual, and you have to use this ritual and take a life. And at the end of the day, it's not the life that you took that matters. It's the ritual you perform to take the life. That's what matters to you. Raider would be a good one to interview for those type of questions.
I watched one. I didn't watch the whole thing though. It was just a short clip. Oh, what was the guy's name? I can picture him. I just can't think of what his name is.
The what?
Right, something with an R. Ramirez, Ramiro.
Oh, Richard Ramirez,
Oh yeah, it might be him.
the Night Stalker.
He kept doing this like weird little smile. It was like creeping me out.
If there was if you could collect like serial killer playing cards, like you could collect baseball cards, I think Ramirez would probably be in my top 10. If you could have like favorite serial killers, just because he really didn't care. It really was
He just looks scary.
well, he would break into people's houses, like couples, kill them both, assault the women. He started out as a rapist. They executed him, and I was kind of disappointed they executed him, just because he would have been somebody that it may have been beneficial to get to know a little bit.
Oh, he was executed?
Yeah, he was executed.
I didn't watch the thing that I seen. It was just like
He
a minute.
had quite a female following in prison too.
Yeah,
He was one.
him and who was the other one? Ted Bundy? Was it Ted
Oh yeah,
Bundy?
Bundy did too. But somebody married Bundy in prison, I do believe. And that's terrifying. He beat women's faces in when they were sleeping, and
Mm-hmm.
there was women chasing him and wanting to marry him.
There are
Eh,
people doing that to Chris Watts too. Like, why would you want to be with somebody who took out their whole family
his babies.
for a piece of ass? Like, seriously.
That one turns my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys's I don't want to say favorite serial killers, but yeah, what's your the one that scares you the most? The one that to you is the definition of a real life monster. I tell my son that a lot. Monsters don't look like the scary movies. Monsters look like, unfortunately, mommy and daddy and the lady at the store. That's what real life monsters look like. Because it's true. We want there to be the monster in the woods with the red eyes that can just snatch you and carry you off and never to be seen again because that's easier to accept than it was the old guy that was the dog catcher that was sitting at the end of the block. The guy you picked up on the side of the road and gave a ride that had his arm in a sling and was on a crutch ended up being, just fine. And that's the last thing you ever did. Did you know the song Riders on the Storm by The Doors is about a serial killer?
It is. I did not know that.
Actually, listen to that song. It is about a serial killer that was picked up during a storm by a family and he killed the family.
Oh man, you're gonna make me go listen to that song now because I don't. It's been a long time since I heard that though.
I did not know that until recently watching another YouTuber's like top 10, and
Wow.
that was the fact that it gave. And then I re-listened to the song and I was like, I'll be damned. It is. It's about a serial. It tells you the whole story if you actually listen for it.
But that's why they tell you, you don't be picking people up and.
Well, we're from a prison town. Remember when we were kids, there was signs up and down the highway that said "Do not pick up hitchhikers."
Right, so I
As
see you with your thumb out. Bye bye. Sorry.
if we were from a town that if there was an escapee, they didn't want you picking them up, so it was just illegal for you to do it. Period. So that was automatic in our upbringing that you don't pick up strangers and you don't do shit like that. But not everybody grew up in a prison town.
Right.
Growing up where we did, do you think that we are more likely to have met somebody that's capable of some of the things we've talked about today?
I don't know.
And just so you're aware of what that prison does, reception and guidance for Michigan is in that prison. So that is the first place every inmate that gets sentenced to prison in the state of Michigan, every inmate walks through those doors. It is also the last place they are all at before they walk out of them. So if they all enter in Jackson and they all leave in Jackson, how many of them really leave? Reason number 542, I think I've met a real serial killer.
Well, I actually have not serial killer, but I have met somebody that turned out to be involved in a murder. And I was like, well, I'll be fucking damned because I had no idea, but I knew there was something about the person that was off. I just got a bad vibe from them, and I didn't like their presence. I didn't know them, but I didn't like them. And then later I find out that, and I'm like, oh, maybe that was my spidey senses telling me they were bad.
I think that there is you can pick up on it. Most people that are capable of these types of crimes, they're faking being human. Now, they don't really know how
Right.
to be socially interactive with people, so they're faking it. So you can sometimes see a crack in the mask, sometimes it doesn't make sense. I think this is a fictional serial killer, but in Red Dragon, I think they demonstrate that a little bit. How she picked, even though she was blind, she picked up on something that wasn't right about him. Do you remember that movie?
Is that that's the one with Anthony Hopkins in it, right?
It's a prequel to Silence of the Lambs.
That's right. Okay, yeah. It's been a long time since I actually seen it though, but I know that I watched it.
It's probably a favorite of everybody's fictional serial killers, Hannibal Lecter. Thomas Harris did a good job writing that character.
Yeah, he's a pretty creepy, like hella fucking creepy. Of course, I think Anthony Hopkins has a lot to do with that. He plays creepy so well.
I wonder if Anthony Hopkins has a problem with that. You know how some fans don't differentiate between a character they play and the person playing it.
Right.
Like, if we were to meet them, they would be like, "Oh, it's Hannibal Lecter." I wonder how many, if he plays on that or not. That would be kind of fun.
You go up to him, like, like if he just did like her, I'd be like,
or if he just is like random in the elevator and makes the little noise he makes when he says that he ate his liver with a nice Chianti and some fava beans, you know, the little noise he makes with his teeth. Just randomly make that noise in the elevators when it's like crowded.
If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell to get notified every time we upload. Until next time, bye!
Bye.